Hey everybody, and it's another week and another episode of my tier list. Not really much to say. I think nobody was really interested in my suggestion for splitting the support tab and keeping the rest as it is, but I'll just take that as, quiet acknowledgement or, quiet agreement, if you will. So I'll just go ahead with that idea. No, or just maybe most people are probably just indifferent or don't really care. And yeah, we left off at the Kutjägare that we put in C tier as like conditional. Every now and then there are reasons for it to use them, but most of the time you won't really see them. Nothing really too fancy or too controversial. Only the Gurkhas 90, which some people were saying definitely should be A tier. I think it was General Boulanger who was comparing them to having 90. Since they have the same MG, very similar transports, meaning very average or like basic transports, not much to take into account. Not much, not very special. However, I have to say though, if we look at those two, did I turn off the I think the 2 AP and to a certain extent a 10% extra accuracy are most certainly more valuable than 10 extra RPM and 3 extra AT weapons, although it's not really a big deal. I think that is definitely worth a very, very good bit more, because that means you can 2-shot 15 and 16 armor, both of which Gurkhas 90 would need 3 shots for, and it's 84 Ace and the like. And SMGs are just not particularly good on shock squads either. They are 5 kmh faster, certainly can be nice, but I stand by Happy 90 being just much better. But again, like I said last time, maybe I'm underrating a bit. But even if I'm underrating them, I would still say that Happy 90 are better. But maybe it's just marginal. But anyway, it's not really a big deal. It's just one tier difference that is quote unquote a tad controversial, maybe. And like I said, at the end of once I'm done with this, I'll probably just take a look at the whole list and then see if anything stands out for me, or maybe by then I change my mind on some things or some but it's not like I put something in E tier when most people think it's A tier or something along those lines. So I don't think it's really that big of a deal. So let's get into the next one. So we stopped at Kutjägare. Okay, so Komandosi. It has certainly died down over the past years, but for a long time. Maybe it's just leftover from ALB or earlier Dragon. I can't really say for certain. But Komandosi seems like so many people rate them as just Terminators, kind of like, oh my god, they're so good special forces, just look at them, and they're pretty mediocre. Like, they have a good MG, not the best one, the best red for MG, ignoring the MG3 that is on 2 Yugo units where it's not that relevant. It is kind of relevant on Mehanizovana, but Mehanizovana themselves, ignoring the transports, are not as OP since, or not as strong as, let's say, Dragoner, because of an SMG making the primary weapon nearly useless. And base Padobranzi, who are the other unit that use MG3, nobody uses, so ignoring that, RPK 74 is, I believe, the best MG, and RPK is good, but not on the same level. AKSU is certainly one of the better primary weapons, essentially an assault rifle with a better stabilizer and better rate of fire. So above average, but RPG 16D is potentially one of the worst, if not the worst, AT weapon you can have for a 35-point squad. And, like, don't get me wrong, they will win 1-on-1 against a lot of infantry that isn't, or like most infantry, if not every infantry squad, or well, every infantry squad that isn't elite itself, right? On even ground. Don't get me wrong, but every elite squad that has an MG does that. So not like they're special in that regard. 15 HP is actually something that elite squads I would argue benefit more from than other squads, because for one, they're already expensive from the get-go, so the plus 5 points that the jump from 10 to 15 HP usually comes with is not really that big of a deal, like 30 versus 35, or it's a much smaller percentage difference than like 20 to 25, right? And since you get fewer Komandosi, that extra 5 points doesn't, or like fewer special forces, that extra 5 points over the course of the game or a couple of minutes isn't really a big deal. However, if there were excuse me, if there were not 15 men, let's say there were 10 men, would they really all either be like valued at 30 points? I don't think so. I mean, maybe, but they'd be pretty bad for 30 and pretty good for 25. But like the ideal 15-man special force squad in the game, I believe, is Korps Mariniers 95. They have a better MG, they have a better primary, and a better anti-tank weapon for the same price. Now, of course, just a Korps Mariniers 95 being just incredibly good doesn't automatically mean that everything that is not the same level is garbage, but it's just by so much better, and still Korps Mariniers 95 are certainly not a must-have unit. So that alone already tells that the Komandosi just aren't particularly great. They have 3 decent transport options. They have the Mi-24D, Mi-17, and the Squad 2. I mean, you can also use the other squads, but with only 1 armor and the base KPVT. Except for this one, it has a bit more range and a bit more accuracy, but only 1 armor. Not really that great. The Sokol, or whatever it's pronounced like, the gun is just weirdly bugged. I mean, it's turreted, but still sometimes it aims but refuses to fire. Weird. I think they kind of a place if you're playing something like Baltic mech, taking them in the hind, which is the only transport you get. But then they're like good for just having sturdy and fast infantry for sneaking around, and elite hinds are always nice. In Eastern Bloc mech, you basically always take FJB. And I guess maybe like Eastern Bloc Motor or something along those lines, a card of those on elite on Squad 2s or something for town fighting maybe. But overall, you don't get a lot of bang for your buck, And as such, I don't think there's really any place for them in unspecialized decks. And even in specialized decks, you usually have better options, which is why I would put them in the C tier. Just had to check if it's a 1M or 2. Speaking of Korps Mariniers base, they're pretty horrible. For once, you don't want battle rifles, because lead squads with battle rifles, I mean, sure, you might think, holy shit, 80% accuracy? That's crazy, and it kind of is. But then you have to take into account, 1, they come on veteran or elite, so they get a bit accuracy bonus, and 2, it's pretty rare that you fire your weapons, especially battle rifles, near the maximum range or at the maximum range. In short, with the veterancy bonus, they are already basically at the accuracy cap, like around 100%-ish accuracy. And even if they hadn't had a veterancy bonus, in forest fights, forest and town fights, which is most places for infantry fight, they also get to that cap. So essentially, the bonus of the accuracy increase, the extra accuracy that you get, sorry for the brain fart here, for the bonus you get from the extra accuracy you get, oh my god, when you fight in forests, you get so much accuracy that you would basically get over 100% accuracy for practical purposes, let's just say that. And then you would also, of course, get the veterancy bonus, but since you can't get over 100%, you get a lot of bonus effects for accuracy that can't come into effect, but you trade rate of fire for it. What I mean with that is, if they had an assault rifle that sure has lower base accuracy and a bit lower range, but higher rate of fire, in a forest fight, that would basically have the same accuracy as their battle rifle, while the battle rifle has a low rate of fire. And that's why on elite squads, SMGs are just so much better than any other squad, and battle rifles are actually pretty bad. Couple that with the MG that I'm honestly not sure of how good it is or bad. I think it's pretty bad. I think it's a, is it a brand stat copy? Let's just see if it's also 450. I think it's probably a brand stat copy except for the accuracy, or like rate of fire wise, which means it will be pretty bad. And a better than Komandosi, but still bad. Well, not bad, but mediocre AT weapon. And honestly, I might even think they're worse than Komandosi because they also don't have any great transports to speak of. So yeah, let's put them in the D tier. Now here we're at Korps Mariniers 95 though, and that's a whole different story. They get the best MG in the game. They get they get also like a carbine, just like the Komandosi, right? So it's essentially an assault rifle accuracy and range, as well as suppression, but improved rate of fire and a stabilizer, but that's not a big deal. And maybe even CQC accuracy, I don't know. But again, that's more or less irrelevant most of the time. A better, albeit not amazing, but still good AT weapon. They're just so good for like town fighting, because in town fighting you can very often just force CQC, and if it's a deeper town or something, or if you're in CQC, then enemy fire support generally is a lot less effective. For one, because they can't get line of sight, and if you're in CQC, then they will also damage their own units. They're just a dream. Again, 15 HP on something like this is actually what you want. Plus, compared to, say, Fire Mega 90, you trade essentially 5 HP for slightly worse weaponry, except for the MG. But that's actually kind of preferable because at 15 HP again just makes them so much more survivable and allows you to get into combat, kill enemy infantry, and get out with a few HP at worst, and then repair them up. And just keep getting value out of them, because that's what you have to do with special forces. If they get in combat, you definitely want to retreat them just because they're so expensive, and get them repaired. Now here's the thing. I don't think they're S tier by any means, but I would say they're A tier. I usually take them over Fallschirmjäger 90. And I put Fallschirmjäger 90 in this tier, so yeah. I don't have the apostrophe here. Alright. Kustjägare. So many 15-man special forces. Or like so many special forces in general coming up. Kustjägare base. Similar story to Korps Mariniers, really. I mean, they have a better rifle both. Although for some reason that bar, even though it has the exact same values, is just filled differently. Same story, really. Nothing outstanding about them. I think they have a slightly better MG, but it's not really worth a whole lot. Kustjägare 90 are a bit different. They get an assault rifle. Here you can see the difference. Or a folding stock assault rifle that get a better stabilizer and CQC accuracy, I believe. But yeah, you can see here the difference between a carbine and like a folding stock assault rifle, like a bit more rate of fire, just for free, which is nice. Basic MG, but of course they get it fancy AT-12T. Now you don't really see them very often, and that is mainly because they're tad inconsistent with the AT-12T. Your 45% base accuracy isn't that great. You of course do get 20 RPM, and being elite squads, you get them on veteran or elite, so a nice accuracy boost. Has still that tad neck, not that consistent, of course. But the other thing is just, you also get the Eric squads, the Fallschirmjäger 90, and that are just so much more versatile and get like a good ground transport. Because all the transports these get are like an unarmed truck. It's amphibious at least, but yeah. And like 2 pretty bad helicopters. And that is one of the big reasons that really holds them back. And the other thing is just their anti-infantry DPS is just not very remarkable for elite squads, given that they have 35 points. Still though, you can certainly do some nice stuff with them, and the 15 HP means that it's gonna take quite a while for them to get killed in force, and they're such a huge threat, of course. Just they don't quite have the same versatility. Most people in unspec Scandi decks don't really use them. Nick the Man really likes them, and he uses them to great effect. But I think it's just mainly the lack of flexibility compared to what is essentially their biggest competitor, Fallschirmjäger 90, is what And in general, of course, but the fact that Housekeeping 90 exists makes them be picked even less. It's just really what hurts them. And I think it's the first B tier of the day. Probably many more to come. I think if they had better transport option, or better MG, or better primary weapon, just something a bit more, they'd be A tier. I think it's really the transport options. If they had the let's say the XA 180, the Swedish ones, which has only one armor, but at least a Browning, as well as, I don't know, like a slightly better MG or something along those lines, they might be A tier, or just more accuracy on the AT-12T. But I believe it's like an 84 upgraded kind of, so it should have 50% accuracy. But I think when they buffed the 84 to 50%, they forgot the AT-12T, I believe. Base Kutei don't get... The base Kutei have normal SMG stats. This gets brought up every time someone sees them on a video, and there's like nearly always one comment asking about that. They have 40% accuracy and 40% stabilizer. Why does the armory say otherwise? Because the unit card displays their CQC weapon, right? So SMGs, which you hopefully know, get a doubled accuracy and stabilizer, although stabilizer doesn't technically matter, or practically matter, although technically there are situations where it's possible, I suppose. And the base accuracy on elite squads is generally 40% accuracy and stabilizer. But for a long time, I don't know if it was always the case, but for a long time, or ever since at some point, the unit card just shows the primary weapon stats of the CQC SMG, which is essentially, right, the way it works is the quote-unquote normal primary weapon that you can see here. Let's take Komandosi as an example. From 1 meter to 525 meters, it gets this accuracy value, and then at 0 meters, 0 to 1 meters, or maybe I'm off by a meter, but anyway, from 0 to 1 meters, essentially, they get the CQC value. So in theory, the CQC value doesn't only take place in the same city block, but also if you're very close in forest. So maybe it's more than 1 meter, maybe it's like 50 or something. In any case, I don't remember. And Kutei 90 just, since those are technically just two different weapons when it comes to the engine or the mechanics, the unit card just shows the wrong one. I hope you understood what I'm trying to say. In short, the actual accuracy is 40%. And, you know, just the actual accuracy is the exact same accuracy that... Where are they? That Fallschmäger have, right? Just assume they have the same primary weapon stats, okay? I hope that makes it clear enough. Instead of the overly convoluted way that I did. I mean, they're 25 points of an SMG, which is nice. Basic law, basic 62, basic MG. But they're cheap, right? 25 points. That does kind of make them good CQC infantry, good town grinders. Once again, very unremarkable transports. But I think they actually do kind of have a place, sort of. I think I'm actually giving them the C tier, simply because 25 point special forces with SMGs already make them actually not that horrible of a unit, just for their ability to town grind fairly efficiently. Town grind, did I say town grind? Yeah. Kutei 90, they're more your all-round, right? They have a mini-me SMG. Once again, a assault rifle with a folding stock, i.e. a bit better stabilizer. Carl-Gustav M2, they're just your all-round kind of all-purpose. They do get a Kyoroko W APC, which is a pretty nice IFV, 2 armor, grenade launcher. It's pretty cool. Pretty unique. I mean, it's literally only wheeled transport that only gets a grenade launcher. You have the BTR 90, for example, that gets autocannon as well, but they're just solid. Kind of like Kutei, but if you want them to be, of course, better with IT and have some nice fire support, but of course you also pay for that. But I think, especially with the actors of the WAPC, they have a pretty nice combo, and that makes them B tier. Especially since town fighting is something that Blue Dragons doesn't really like as much. You actually see them fairly frequently. LAAD Blowpipe, I don't think I need to really talk about. Garbage tier, garbage accuracy, garbage range. I mean, it's guided, which again, not really usually that big of a deal, but LAAD Javelin. Did I put the Javelin in the B tier, or did I? I did. So I will put this one also in the B tier. LAAD Redeye are a bit of a different thing. I think even though they have the Bradleys. Okay, so here's the thing, right? Maybe I'll note something like that. You know what? I'll introduce it right away. I thought about this for a second. So for example, if you remember, I gave Gavnuni A tier because of the Merkava to A. Of course, I gave them a star because they're only there because of the Merkava to A. Still, you literally never see anyone use them. So here's the dilemma, right? On the one hand, I kind of want to rank infantry more or less irregardless of what the other deck has access to. I'll of course mention it, but it should really not have an influence on where they rank. Still, seeing a unit that you virtually never see in A tier suddenly is a kind of weird, and for some people might be a bit confusing. So this is why I introduce another notation, and that is italic, which means that you never see them, which essentially means I'll add that point later on, which essentially means that I should have done it at the start of the video. Who cares? Which essentially means that even though they're there, you essentially never see them because there's a unit that does the same thing but better, or fills the same role but better, and you don't really need to put more than one in there. And I think that's gonna be the same thing with the LAAD Redeye. I think the fact that you have access to them in the Bradley, in the vacuum, ignoring Riflemen exist, and the other mindbats, isn't inherently horrible because of 45 points total carrier with a burst length of 2 and 5 armor, as well as an autocannon and medium optics, is pretty damn good actually. I mean, not pretty damn good, but pretty good. Yet, even if they were in a higher tier, you would still never see them just because you have access to the Riflemen. But once again, I think just because Riflemen exist doesn't mean that in a vacuum again, which is what this tier list is supposed to be, makes them horrible. Still, again, I just want to be able to, I want people to be able to see that there's still a reason why they're never picked. So the Bradley alone, I think it genuinely makes them B tier, right? Just imagine they were not all the other manpads had no Bradley access, as well as the Riflemen had no Bradley access. Like, Bradleys, don't get me wrong, are not amazing, but they're pretty good. And the 5 armor means that they can survive at 22 up to 22 AP. Kinetic means medium tanks like 84As cannot one-shot them at max range, and it is quite useful for surviving. You know, for example, let's say you engage an M84A. Of course, just like the way I'm describing happens not very that often, but to explain what I mean. Let's take the Humvee Tau 2, right vehicle type Humvee, no armor. Imagine it engages the M84A at max range. It shoots the Tau 2, it hits, 84A just tanks and keeps driving towards it, shoots and kills it. The M2A2 Bradley will just tank the shot and shoot its second missile. And the fact that it doesn't have to reload after each individual missile, but only after 2, means it can get that second missile out immediately. And it makes it pretty good. And this is why I will actually put them in here, but with the note that they're not supposed, or that still nobody takes them. I'll add the description after this video, and I'll also mention it at the start of the next one. LAAD Stinger A. I mean, they're still gonna be B tier. I don't think it may. Actually, I mean, they're B tier for sure, just because the other Stingers are also B tier, right? But I think having access to the Bradley is quite nice. I think not a lot of people make use of that, but personally, I'm actually quite a big fan of it. This is a tough one. And this is basically goes for the same, because in my mind, LAAD Stinger A and Stinger C are more or less equivalent. Because while the Stinger C, of course, have 20% more accuracy, you get more of Stinger. But I mean, they're cheaper. But even more important, you actually get more, which is very nice when you use them in 5-pointers. Which is why they're more or less equal to each other, and they get exact same transports as well. But does having access to Bradley already make them A tier? I would say no. Because while it is a really nice option to have, I don't think it suddenly makes them incredibly good. And they start to fill a somewhat different role, as in they now are an ATGM vehicle to get in the infantry tab, and having access to the manpad is a bonus. Whereas if you take them in the 5-pointer, you buy it for manpad. Now, does that... I mean, of course, it's nice to... It's a good thing, right? That is essentially 2 different cards in... Or like you have 2 completely different ways to play them. If you want to, that's of course good, but does that suddenly make them a tier higher? Maybe not in this case. I think in other cases it might be. Like, for example... Oh no, it's not the same thing, but... Yeah. Again, maybe this is one of those things that maybe I'll change my mind on later. Let's just go on. Base Legion. They kind of have a place in like Eurocorps motorized if you want affordable shock squads. Also, they're 30 kmh, and because light infantry, they're not amazing. They only have a basic assault rifle, although it's a bullpup, so they get a bit better stabilizer, basic MG, and a decent AT weapon, 19 AP, good accuracy, decent range. And with the VAP T20 in motorized, or just for 30 points in motorized, they're not too horrible. The thing that makes them C tier. Pure Pirates, it's not really a good transport option. I think the only reason to use it is with Komandos Para, the recon squads. That can be nice, but I think you don't want to use it with Legion 90 because the autocannon is on the side, so the whole helicopter has to turn for the gun to fire. Or the autocannon, I should say. Legion 90. Now that's a whole different story. I think I briefly mentioned those when I was talking about Housekeeping 90 and FSK. But they're S tier. They're 25 points when they should essentially be 30. They have an assault rifle, which is fine. They have one of the best AT weapons in the game. They have the best MG in the game. They have good transport options. They have the VAP T20, which is pretty good for 15 points. Of course, could be like a KT as well, and the primary weapon could be like a carbine, but in theory they always could be better, but anything could. But they're just straight up overpowered. Yeah, I could, if you want to know more why, I can answer a comment, but they're just ridiculously strong, and there's a reason why you see them all the freaking time. Lehka Pechota, they're very lekker. A joke that you really only understand if you speak German or Dutch or maybe some other languages that are similar to that use a similar word. In any case, they're interesting. As I said it before, SMGs on shock squads not that great. They get a good MG, but it's really their reckless rifle that is the star here. It might not look like much, 40% accuracy, 12 AP, 7 RPM, but it's really the range that shines here. And the fact that it's not guided, right, that's also a very big deal. Like, they shoot and it instantly hits or misses, right? There's no, like, missile in the air that you see and that you can dodge or anything like that. They only need, line of sight for a second or so. And they're only 20 points as well, right? So given that they're 20 points, their anti-infantry DPS is okay. In towns, it's good because of SMGs. That's the one place where SMGs on shocks are good, is towns, really. And this is also mainly what they're meant for. They're not meant for like forest fighting by any means. They're horrible at that. They're kind of good for sneaking around as well with their speed, and if you get behind enemy lines, and then you can like maybe snipe some reinforcements with while you're still in the forest, you know, over the open field. It can be cheeky. The recoilless rifle also has a very low noise value, meaning it's very hard to spot them when they fire with the recoilless rifle. And just all around very good. They get great transport with the Mi-17. It's a really nice combination. You drop them at a town near the front line. They defend the town, and if too much, you know, and shoot it like IFVs and such at long range sideshot tanks that sometimes you forget about them or they weren't spotted before. They're just so incredibly useful and such a defensive powerhouse. Or some okay wheeled options as well. But they're just straight up amazing. Although sometimes hard to fit in still, even though I definitely think they're A tier. Yeah. Leichte Schützen. When I mentioned base gun strategy, I also briefly went over those. Not overdose, not OD. Essentially shocks versions. I believe they still have the wrong veterancy, meaning you get 12 at trained and 8 at hardened instead of 12 at hardened and 8 on veteran, which is quite a shame. If it wasn't for that, that'd be pretty decent, but I think you'd always be better off taking Lehka Pechota and Eastern Block. And the fact that they're guided and don't have the Mi-17 as a transport option is quite a big deal actually. Still, I think it's still kind of C tier, not D tier, C tier, because again they're shock at least, and having a 10-man meta squad isn't really too horrible. They also have a 10-point transport option to make them cheaper, not just 15-point ones. They also have access to the SPW-80, which is a nice transport actually. So I think they're certainly C tier, even though you still very rarely see them. LHV. Basically the most average these days reservist squad in the game. 10 HP, 5 points, and a 5-point transport with a Browning and 1 armor. I think that's about as average as it can be. Did we already have a reservist squad before that is similar? We had Mot Schützen, which are tad better, but honestly not by so much that it's really a big deal. Plus LHV get a better transport option since their transport has Browning, right? The German transport, the M103G, has just a MG3. So I think, did I put him in C tier? Yes, I did. So yeah, I would say that's also where they belong. LAAD Riflemen. LAAD Riflemen and LAAD Riflemen 90, very similar in a role. LAAD Riflemen base, they're cheap, 20 points. Just like, they're 10 points like a normal line infantry squad, but they of course get a dragon instead of, let's say, a law or RPG 7. But that is pretty good. I mean, sure, it only has 35% accuracy. Sure, there's only 10 AP, but it doesn't matter if you have like 3 of those firing at you every 5 seconds. While you also have other stuff to worry about. Like, for their price, they're just insanely good. They're cheap, not very consistent, but still area denial. And the thing is, with the same goes for like the 16 AP 80 GM squads, right? The 10 points Falgot squads, etc. You can't ignore them really, because sure, there's a good chance they will miss, but if you just leave just the side of your tank open and bank on the LAAD Rifleman missing, and it doesn't work out, then well, you lost like half the HP of your. Okay, maybe not with LAAD Rifleman. Okay, they have 10 AP, and the T90 has like 10 side armor. You lose 1 HP, fine. But still, they're really good for like denying IFVs, light vehicles, KTs, stuff like that. And for 10 points, that is just insane value. And once again, just because, and the thing is, they're ATGMs, and they can't for sure know whether those are dragons or super dragons until they're spotted, of course. So at that point, your opponents will still be watching out. But I'm not certain if they deserve to be 8 here. I mean, I did say they're insanely good. And LAAD Riflemen are basically the same thing. 90s, I should say. just more range, more accuracy, more AP, but of course you pay more. So the more consistent, bigger brother with also bigger punch. I think they're kind of interchangeable, doing similar things. Like you get 2 of those versus 3 of those, for example, for the same price. You always use them in a Humvee. But I don't think they're... I'll fucking do it. I'll fucking do it. Maybe it's a bit out of spite because people always say they're garbage. Well, of course, it's a exaggeration. Of course, a lot of people don't say that. But sometimes people just think, oh my god, US infantry is so garbage. No, ladders are not good. So maybe that's a bit talking out of me, but I really think they're that great. It's just that you only really use 1 card. You know, just because they're 80 doesn't mean you should always spam them, of course. Or like take 3 cards. But the role that they fill, which is kind of similar, basically very similar to like the Lehka Pechota role, really. It's just they do that pretty well. And don't underestimate the range of 1900 meter, or like for 10 points, 1575 meter range in a 10-point transport on 10 HP as well, right? It's not like they're 2 HP squads that die to 1 mortar shell or something. That's the big deal, right? That they are not that easily killed, just because of being 10 HP. Livgarden, they're great. They're 20-point shock squads with MG3 battle rifles and a cartridge of M2. They're very, very similar to Komandosi 90. They're a tad worse. However, they get one of the best 5-pointers in the game, which makes them a bit better. But they don't have a wheel transport, and of course, Komandosi 90 have much even better MG and an even better primary weapon. But if you want, like, they're one of the best town grinders you can get, or all-round infantry you can get. Like shock, CQC, good enough AT for 20 points. But if you had better AT, then that'd be 25 points already, which we'll see. But for 25 points, you can't get a lot stronger than it. The only thing that's really stronger are Komandosi 90. But they're just still insanely good. And Livgarden 85. You know, Livgarden are like, they're the card that you take in if you are worried about, like, you know, having to do a lot of town fighting. Because you would also have access to Dragoon, which are probably gonna be your primary force grinding tool, as well as all-round infantry for like meat shielding. Livgarden 85 you take when you want just the all-round purpose infantry squad. It's of course it's still gonna be just as good at town fighting. Not for the same, well, not point for point, of course, because you pay 5 points more for the same anti-infantry weaponry. But they're also then gonna be better at defending towns because of the extra range, extra AP, denying forests or something. And I say that all the time, but it just has to be said. That 100%, it's not even that much about the 2 AP, which is still nice because now you will 3-shot 84 A's instead of 4-shotting. Maybe even 5-shotting actually with only 18 AP. I think it's even 5 shots you need. You will 3-shot 84 A's, which is really good. But that extra range is just such a big, it makes such a huge difference. That even if it was still 18 AP, it would genuinely be worth 5 points. But they just have slightly different roles. But in both of the roles, they're just very, very excellent. Excellent, not excellent. So I think once again, 8 here. Hamlet, which is is that a Redeye? I think it's a Redeye. I think they maybe Eugen gave them the wrong icon or something. Any case, garbage, of course. LLRkt Hamlet. And then we have Stinger C. I think I think you know the drill. What a name! What a name, though. And probably my favorite unit in the game, LSCR 40. They're just amazing. They have a very good anti-infantry weapon. They have a carbine, right? They're one of the best AT weapon in the game. They have an Igla, which is good. they're just so useful, so versatile, so strong. They have a good transport with an SPW-80. Again, sometimes people like to complain about the SPWs or like BTRs. And sure, the 60 PBs and 70, they're pretty bad. The AD is actually pretty good. Not on line infantry squads, there it's not that great either. But if you get them with truck or especially with elite squads, then it's certainly a 5-point premium worth paying for. 2 front, 2 side means they're decently survivable given their wield. And KBVT with 40mm range and 20% accuracy, plus the massive accuracy boost you get from being on veteran or maybe even elite, makes that KBVT actually pretty decent. It's not gonna win against like autocannon vehicles or something, of course, but it means that when it gets into those close range engagements in forest fights, it does have the accuracy to consistently hit, and thus actually, if you have like 2 or 3 of those, they will Shrek aim extents in forests, right? So that is really good. But of course, they don't do the same thing as like massed VAB T20s or WC551s. But when it comes to like elite squads or squads like these, I would always take the SPW-80 over a VAB T20, just because the 1 extra front and side armor, getting them to the front line so much easier. WC551 is of course different because it's 2 front armor and has a good autocannon, so it's that much better. But don't underestimate the late KPVT with 20% base accuracy on a veteran or elite. And LSTR40 themselves are just amazing. They're just so good. And it, especially on Red 4, they make your AA game, outside of, against Seal Rushes of course, but your AA game just so much more comfortable, because really all you need is this and OSAS in your sublog. They will deal like the first 4 damage to like planes because they're so much closer to the front line and very often be able to thus get a shot off, even though they have low range against planes. And the OSAS with the 7 HE will just then finish the job, right? It's just so versatile. And then they have good AT, they're good taunt, they're just so versatile and so strong. And I just can't get enough of them. Cooming. So they're most definitely S tier. RBS 70. No, they're very interesting. The RBS series in general. Here's the deal with them. For once, Manpad and C tier actually. Why? Oh, actually we have Igla one there as well. They of course have only 4 HG, which is obviously a big downer, while being guided. It's not that great. They have decent range, but also only 45% accuracy, right? If you compare them to Igla, Igla has 55% accuracy. With a bit less range, but they're also fire and forget. The other thing is also that cheapest transport is 10 points. They already cost 20 points base. Igla costs only 15. So they're at least 30 points. So you pay, most of the time base Iglas are taking a 5-pointer, so they're 20 points, right? So they cost 50% more. And for that, I mean, they have the STRF 9040, but honestly, that doesn't really make them that much better. I mean, it does make them better, but not really by a huge margin, I would say. But it kind of still makes them, B tier just because of the STRF. Like if he didn't have access to the RBS 90 or something else, they would still be like a decent pick for mech decks and something like that. And even an unspec would be okay. It hurts me to say, but it's still it's a B tier. It's still B tier. But it's gonna be Lvgrp RBS 70. But I think put it in italic. There you go. Very fancy. Because there's multiple reasons you don't take them. For one, you get your STRFs, so there's heavy IFVs with different squads. Then you have the RBS 90, of course, which for 10 points more, 5 points more, just has more accuracy and more range. And even the accuracy alone is just such a big deal. And I think they're actually A tier, thanks to the STRF 9040. It's, again, not a combination you see very often. But I think it's still a strong combination, and the reason is just because CV90 exists and STRF with the ATGM squads exist. But it's not unheard of for people to spam or use RBS 90s with STRF 9040s, and I think that actually makes them A tier. It actually does. but once again in italics. Okay, Jian. They're pretty good. You know how I said that base Kutei are like pretty good town grinders, 25 points. Assault SMG alone, like even if they only have a basic MG and that is law, already makes it pretty good. Jian are basically the same, just better, right? They have a RPG 7, which is one of the best anti-tank weapons you can get without having to pay for them, right? If you get what I mean, right? If they had like a good AT weapon, they would be 30 points by now. But it's basically the best AT weapon you get without having to be 30 points. And a good MG, an above average MG. As well as the SMG. Oh no, this is only the 90s version that actually has 5% extra accuracy. Okay, never mind. But I think it's a suppressed SMG, meaning that they don't get an increased noise value. Unless, of course, it just lies with this icon here. And especially like Moto and on elite decks, on elite, they just shred infantry in towns. Now here's the thing: A or B tier. I think it slowly makes them B tier, because as good as they are for that role, it is just not very needed these days. There just aren't a whole lot of deep towns that you need this dedicated squad for. They're certainly not like as kind of a tech pick that you would only use if you know beforehand it's a town heavy fight. You would still, like, a good amount of people would still put them in their like all-round decks. Because even in forests, right, they will melt infantry. It's just that for the price they're not particularly good against vehicles and will just easily get overwhelmed by like Riflemen, spam and the like. I think they're still only B tier though. As much as good as they are. Jian 90. I think it's the same as Spetsnaz. They're like, sure, they melt infantry. But for one, base Jian already melt infantry. But Jian 90 are now 10 points more expensive and are virtually useless against vehicles. So, yeah. You specialize them in something that they are already pretty good at, while they sacrifice they're significantly more expensive and sacrifice the ability to at least deal with 5-pointers. That's what makes them really C tier. If you know you're playing on like Once on Harbor or something like that, then yes, there's a reason to put them in, and then I would probably put them in. But Jian 90 just fill the same role mostly, while being more versatile. Zhandui are D tier. Why? They are Mot Schützen base for 5 points more, while not having particularly better transports. They have a good 5-pointer, but that's about it. Even though the unit card might lie to you, let me go to Mot Schützen real quick. But if you look at the MG, you might say, oh, they're even worse. The MG actually has the exact same stats as Mot Schützen base. It's just the ammo consumption, it's different, but the DPS is literally the same. But yeah, the same unit for, sure, you get 2 more RPG 7 rockets, but who cares? The same units for 5 points more. And Mot Schützen these days, as nice as they are certainly not the meta anymore. They used to be, but they're not anymore. They're still good, but not good enough. And consider for the same price you get Livgarden, which have a battle rifle, which is better. Cartwheels of M2, which is better. MG3, which is better. For the same price. They're actually useful against vehicles, and a melt infantry even more. So yeah. Usually do 90. They're awkward. For 20 points, they might be a bit too strong. For 25 points, they're just a bit too weak. They have a decent AT weaponry, but for 25 points on a shock squad that is 10 HP, 21 AP just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't cut it. You 2-shot 13 armor, and that's about it, right? You don't, from 14 onwards, you need at least 3 shots. You 1-shot up to 7 armor, which is a Marder 2, granted. But it's just, for 25 points on a shock squad, that otherwise, sure, it has a set of C90, which for 15 points is honestly underpriced like the Marder one. But again, not really a big deal since you don't have access to 10-point line squads in them. or something similar. But it's just they're like certainly not garbage, but when you have to rely on them for anti-tank purposes, they will disappoint. And as good as the ZSC90 is, it doesn't really suddenly make them like a great pick either. Just somewhere between B and C, but I don't really know for sure which one. But we put Kutei 90 in there, which are also kind of underwhelming, so I guess they're also B tier. Mainly, I think, also because the set is 90. And they have a good 5-pointer. Yeah. Again, maybe the B tier is gonna be a bit overloaded, but I think it's just natural. I don't think you will have an... I think it's kind of similar to normal distribution, I guess you could say. The main is gonna be around B and like then C, D, and E and S with the fewest ones, and then the rest is gonna be like decently, you know, you have your peak at B, and then, you know, fewer and fewer towards the extreme tiers, I guess. So maybe that's how it should be potentially. I don't know. M67 Han. We had a similar one earlier. And I mentioned that you would only use the Japan. I think the South Korean ones with the same weaponry, but you only really use these ones because, or you mainly see these ones because you have access to the Hachiki, which is kind of like a slightly worse STRF 9040 or worse CV90 or Maru 2. So they're really mostly carriers for this. They kind of work decently for that because sometimes, you know, they can be good to have around. And with the Blue Dragons as well as Blue Mag, which is where you see this. Having access to like 10-point spam, 10-man spam infantry, you actually kind of prefer them to come with these squads because it gives you some nice utility that you would otherwise not even have. So it kind of stones two birds at once. Yeah, these ones, the Jigsaw Hwagiban that you never really see. The M67 Han CC. So I think honestly, I think A tier with a star. I think without the transport, they would be C tier. But that Hachiki really elevates them. It's a very solid IFE. Not as good as the SRF 90 in most circumstances. I think it is a slightly lower rate of fire. But don't underestimate just having access to the Geomat. It has a decent range. Not the best accuracy in AP, but like when you're playing against a mech deck or just lots of cheap units, and you have some of these scattered around that might sideshot a tank or something along those lines, it's pretty good. Medium optics is also really nice to have. The more. I think they just Carl Gustav squads. That's it. Did we have them? Probably did. Hold on. Oh, it's Stoltogrupper are actually in the C tier, but I think that's because they have a good 5-pointer, right? They have a 5-pointer with 2 armor and the Browning, but the Maw, which are essentially the same but worse transports, right? I mean, they have a Bison, but it's a wheel, and you want them in 5-pointers if you use them. And for that reason, and they have an SMG which isn't nice at all. It really makes him D tier. Mehanizovana, I don't think I need to say it, right? I have an MG3, which is great. SMG, which is not what you want on line squads. A kind of unique-ish AT weapon that only they use, I believe. As okay, very similar to the Blendicide, actually. 14 AP, which is decent. 50% accuracy, which is also decent. Not that great accuracy range. Basically, like for all intents and purposes, like a worse RPG-7. Sure, you get 10% more accuracy. 10% more accuracy, but you would much rather have the extra range. However, you of course get the PP, you get the BVP series, and those transports are just monstrous. And I think that, I mean, I don't think there's any way of going around there. There certainly Mehanizovana Pes. Let's do it like this. I guess let's do it like this. Yeah. Even if you spam it with a 5-pointer, it's not amazing, but it kind of still works because of MG3 spam, despite having a SMG, but MG3 just helps so much. And then you have like a lot of good transports. You have the PB if you want that, if you want the cheap fire support, BVP if you want the affordable but somewhat survivable fire support. And you can even get them in like high-end BVPs, which aren't that horrible. They're not amazing, but yeah, it's just they're just yeah. Mesaya'at or something like that. Similar story to the Granatomid. However, of course, they get the Merkava 2A. And I think so, and people actually take them in the Merkava 2A. Not always. Most of the time you see the Rovite, but sometimes you see the Mesaya'at. Because just like the M67 Han, right? You stone 2 birds at once. I know it's called two birds with 1 stone, but this sounds funnier. You stone 2 birds at once. Get like the Merkava 2A, which you always kind of want, and you get like the squad, which is nice to have. And yeah, I think without it they would be beat here for sure, but whoopsie. They're certainly 8 here with the Merkava 2A, but I don't think I need to either make them metallic or give them a star, because you certainly see them. You don't see them very often, of course, but you still see them. Milan, I think we went over this. Milan, just Milan. Milan. Oh, hold on. Next up we have Milan 1, which are also the same squad essentially, like literally, right? Literally same weaponry, like even the same battle rifle and such. But of course, the nice thing about them is you can get them in the Lynx H7, just like the Milan F1 used by the French, where you can get a Jeep Panther. Here you can get a cheap Lynx H7, which is even a tad better than a Panther, because do you get? Oh no, you get the same amount of snap. For a second I thought you get fewer and more, but it's even a tad faster actually, and smaller as well, which helps the survivability, of course. And yeah, other than that, basically same deal as the French Lynx. Did I say Lynx Milan 1? Jesus. Same with the French Milan 2. In the B tier, because now they're sure you can still get them with the Lynx. They're still solid on their own, but you don't really. They're 50 points now instead of 40, right? It's quite a big price increase with the Lynx. You can't spam them around as much. It's not versatile, and then you actually care for the squad inside and can't just suicide it. So yeah, Miluim. I mean, yeah. I think they're essentially very similar. Oh, Miluim actually. Ooh. I always thought it called Miluim. Same story as High Schützen, really basically same weaponry. Browning 5 point. It's a bit actually it's a worse 5-pointer because it has no autonomy, which sometimes can actually be annoying. But yeah, Mistral. Once again, we already went over this with the which ones were they? South Korean ones, I believe. Mornaricka Pes. Now, those are the squads that I was hoping for to be essentially the Red 4 version of Stormer. LLRkt F1, although they had a very similar weapon, but I think it wasn't actually exact LLRkt F1, and it's actually like called something OSA or something. In any case, I was hoping there would be 20-point squads with this, 19 AP rain launcher and then MG3. Never got that, unfortunately, or fortunately. Who knows? Maybe it's better that way. But yeah, they're basically like Legion 90, Legion Mace, right? Assault rifle, LRAK F1, and basic MG. They get a 5-pointer, so yeah, they're not horrible, of course. If you wanted to, you could take them like Marines or something. But other than that, yeah. Morskaya Pekhota base. The only really good thing about them is that they get a K29 TB, but for 25 points, having the base RPG is just absolutely horrible. Yeah. Even if you ignore the fact that there's Morskaya Pekhota 90, having just a base RPG is just pretty bad, but they might honestly still be C tier just because I get a K29 TB. And I think that's what I'm gonna do. Would they be... Well, first... Would they be E tier without? I don't think so. Like, the thing is, Morskaya Pekhota 90. They're mainly used if you want, like, sort of town grinding infantry, like all-round town grinding infantry. That can also do some other stuff, but the thing is, they're actually decent because for the same price, you have 17 AP, so you can actually kill 5-pointers consistently if you hit them. They're not amazing, of course, with only 40% accuracy on a launcher, but it's just a big plus having access to that for the same price. Just having a base RPG honestly doesn't even make them that much worse. Still, of course, you don't see them because Morskaya Pekhota 90 costs the same. And get better transport options for the B tier 90 and B tier 80A. And that's why the 90s are just B tier. Not a lot of people use them, but I think they're still very decent. And Pechota. And yeah, just very good all around. B tier 90 is nice, B tier 80A is nice. K29 is nice with being the only helicopter, I believe, with 1 rear armor, which is more impactful than you might think it is. Because 1 armor protects against small arms, right? And when your helicopter gets shot by infantry with small arms, sometimes it gets stunned and panicked and just starts circling around. And then having no rear armor means that once, like at the time where you show the rear, you actually start taking full damage for a bit. And that helps massively with the survivability against infantry. Base Mot Schützen. They used to be like the king of the battlefields for a short while the BMP 1 was 10 points. These days, even in the Eastern Bloc, you don't see them that often anymore. But I mean, 15 points for shock squads is still pretty damn good. Especially since they don't just carry the law, but the RPG 7. Which, once again, basically the best AT weapon you get without having to pay a 5-point premium. In my eyes, at least. They're B tier for certain, but are they quite A tier? I think they honestly still are. You just have to be careful to not fall into the trap, which I might have nearly fallen into. That is, well, you never see Eastern Bloc, so does Mot Schützen are not great anymore? Well, that's not quite exactly it. It's just that Eastern Bloc is essentially a worse Baltic and Entente, so that doesn't inherently make Mot Schützen bad or the whole deck horrible. Of course, they're not as great as they used to be, but just having access to Mot Schützen for 20 points with a 5-pointer, there's 2 armor and a Browning, 50 cal. It only has 1 side armor and is pretty slow, but it's still a very strong combination. And on Mech, on Elite or something, can still melt infantry. And if you need like cheap town grinding fodder or infantry, then that's as good as it can get, really. Yeah, that's really all there is to say. They're still pretty good, to say the least. Mot Schützen 90 though? This is... I am still not certain on them. Like, they have better DPS. They actually have a bit more accuracy on a primary weapon as well. And I believe the MG is better, although it's a bit wonky. It's just that for 5 points more, yes, they get a significantly stronger AT weapon, but it also loses a lot of range. But I'm really uncertain if that really still only makes them the B tier for sure. But I mean, 20 points for 24 AP and still pretty good anti-infantry DPS. You know, I'll be the guy. I'll be the fucking guy. I'll put them in A tier, if you like it or not. Maybe I'm overrating them. And as much as I dislike them myself, I think they're maybe actually a bit underrated. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe once again, you know, this is not 100% final. Once I'm done with the tabs, I'll go look over them again and maybe change a few unique units or like some rankings here and there of individual units. But I think there might still be 8 here. No, they're not. I changed my mind. Why? Because at 20 points, the inability to consistently deal with 5-pointers is just horrible. For a 10-man squad. I changed my mind. And they don't have transports to really suddenly change the tide, I guess we could call it. Right? The transports are like, they're decent, right? SPW 80 can be nice, SPW 50 is okay. BMP 9 is usable for the most part. They're not great, but usable. But I think not being able to consistently deal with 5-pointers and not having anything to make up for that in terms of, you know, let's say Lehka Pechota, right? They would also not be able to consistently deal with 5-pointers in forests, right? But they have like that massive range to help them. They don't have anything like that. They have they have a massive AP. Sorry for that. But it's not like they are consistently being able to deal with tanks either. And I don't think that's good enough to make up for that. And yeah. And it's, of course, not just 5-pointers that they can't deal consistently with any vehicles, okay? And at 20 points is just kind of inexcusable. Oh, you could, and of course, you could always argue, hell, well, Lehka. Sorry. You could always argue, well, Lehka Pechota aren't very consistent either. Well, sure they're not, but they're just, you know, is a lot harder to play around in that sense, right? Mot Schützen, you just can very easily, like, quite literally drive around, evade, because they have a very little area of influence. Lehka Pechota have a very huge area of influence, and that, you know, makes up for the low inconsistency. So yeah, although I am still wanting to try them out more. I still want to try them out more, I should say. So yeah, who knows? Maybe by the end of all of this, I have them used more often and change my mind and they're now 80 or something like that. Who knows? In any case, that concludes part 3. We're just over halfway done. Let me quickly show you. Just over halfway done here. And given that there's gonna be a lot of we have more Milans, we have more Fagots, more Iglas, etc. We should probably only be hopefully 2 more episodes. And yeah, Mornaricka next. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will split the support tab into AA and artillery. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll hopefully see you next time.